Welcome to the Bright Arrow webinar, Multiplier Effect, Scaling Your Impact as a Leader. We will get started in just a moment. For those of you joining us live via our hosted site, welcome. And to those of you joining us live on LinkedIn, happy to have you for your lunch break today. Let's get started and take a look at our agenda for today. So we're going to talk first about what is it that only a leader can do inside of the organization? When we think about what it means to even scale ourselves, we need to first get clear on what is your unique position and your unique work to deliver. We'll talk quite a bit about what it means to make time to think about your work and what you might think about during that time. We will talk about effective delegation. I guarantee you're all delegating already, but we're going to talk about some ways we see in our practice that you might tune that up or take that to the next level. We'll take a look at what it means to optimize workflows across your team and the value of cultivating leadership development opportunities as you scale yourself so that you are scaling others. A little bit about Bright Arrow. We were founded in 2015. I am Tegan, the founder and CEO of Bright Arrow. I'll tell you a bit more about myself here in a moment. But our firm is a certified woman-owned business. We are dedicated to empowering leaders and the organizations they serve. And our work is to help leaders clarify their work and their organization's work to build their confidence and their success through our coaching and our team coaching programs and strategic partnerships. So as I said, I'm Tegan, the founder and CEO of Bright Arrow. Before I founded Bright Arrow, I had an entire career inside of corporate America as a leader and executive myself. I now lead as an executive for Bright Arrow. And so I have, like many of you on this call, a variety of experience over the years and what it means to scale myself and to continue to scale myself. I'm also the mother to a 4-year-old named Athena. So she is who I spend a lot of my free time with. And for fun, I love to work out. I don't know if everyone would agree with that one, but I do love to get outside and move my body, and I'm very into reading about longevity and nutrition, a couple of passions of mine. So my co-presenter today is Maggie Gough. So I'll turn it over to you, Maggie, to introduce yourself and say hello.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. I'm Maggie Gough. I'm a partner and COO at Bright Arrow, and prior to coming into the leadership development world, I spent my career in the corporate wellness world and learned from that body of work that ultimately we need really healthy leaders to create really healthy workplaces for people. So I have been enjoying learning new things in this world, and I'm excited to share some of my own personal leadership takeaways from my career. And I am a mother to 3 kids, and I have a spouse, 2 cats, and a dog. And in my spare time, you can find me in the woods hiking.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maggie.
So a few quick reminders today. We do have a Q&A area, and we're going to be checking that. It's on the right side of your screen. If you want to drop a question, you can put it in the Q&A tab within that section. So feel free to take a look there. If you just want to drop into the chat, which it looks like a few people have with where they're coming in from today, thank you all for joining. We love to hear that as well. So feel free to drop in the chat, or if you want to drop a question and you want to make sure it gets to our eyeballs, be sure to put it in the Q&A tab. So as we're getting started here today, we're going to talk about what only a leader can do. And this is really important. It's a conversation that Tegan and I calibrate on often because we need to make sure that, especially as a small business, we are clearly situating ourselves within the value that only we can generate as leaders, and being careful about that work creep that comes in both ways. So, Tegan, will you please explain to everyone what is the value? When we say leaders are responsible for value generation, what does that mean? And what is it that only a leader can do?
Yeah, thank you. Before I answer that, I want to say this for those of you tuning in, and that is The reason we talk about scaling ourselves is because we don't talk about it enough inside of organizations. So I have a feeling everyone on here is going to identify with this. You're preparing to be promoted or you've been promoted and some segment of your previous work never went away, but you inherited a bunch more responsibilities or a whole other department or 12 other direct reports. And it then becomes your job to figure out how you're going to scale yourself while you scale the business. And if you've never had an executive coach, please know this is a lot of where we spend our time with executives and leaders is in helping them think about this very topic, which is why we wanted to talk about it with you today. So to Maggie's question to me, thank you, Maggie. What is value creation? We are going to talk about that a lot today. And I will try to keep it simple in saying this. At some earlier levels of leadership and earlier in our careers as leaders, value creation is often in the contribution of application and work delivery. Meaning, if I'm the head of marketing, I, as a leader, may be creating social media posts. I may be designing workflows for marketing or deciding what content's going to be downloaded for marketing. When we become more senior in our, and that's the value we create is at that level of leadership. As we become more senior in our roles, value creation becomes about revenue generation, major cost savings for the organization, or increasing the company's overall valuation. Meaning, if we were to sell this company today, how much is this company worth? The more the company is worth, the more money it has to play with to give its leaders to do the things they need to do with their budget and to give increases to their employees. And so those are some reasons we want to think about value creation for the organization. But where we spend our time differs quite a bit depending on how we create value in our jobs. So Maggie and I are going to try to be distinct today between those two ways we may create value as leaders inside the organization. Is that a good starting point, Maggie, getting to your main question?
It is. And I think I always want to provide like real world examples for these things because we get into this business jargon. And when you've experienced it, when someone says it, it makes sense. But if you haven't experienced or didn't realize that you were experiencing it yet, it just sounds like a lot of words. And so I think when I think about what you're talking about, the example that comes to mind for me is when I started at Bright Arrow, one of the initial deliverables I had as COO is to unify our tech stack. So we had Microsoft, we had Google, we had a multitude of other apps, and we were trying to integrate everything. And it was creating a lot of disjointed processes and issues on the back end that really just needed to be, have someone put their eyes on it and manage this through to the end. So for me, my role as COO, the value that I came to create in that project was to assess the entire tech stack. Tell me everything that we have and how we're using it and what does it cost and where is it causing problems. Tell me how we function as a team within this. Where are we having inefficiencies? And then as I gathered that information, what I really was doing was observing how the team makes decisions. And my role at that point was to direct the next steps. And even in the observations that I made, pull the team together cross-functionally to even talk about the way that maybe we've made decisions in the past, that we could make decisions differently in the future so that we didn't keep running into the same obstacles or places where we stall out. Mm-hmm. So the functional leader that I worked with, her role was to pull all of this together and actually build it and train the team on it and make sure that all of the pieces were in play. So I just thought that was when we were talking about this and planning for this webinar, that was the example that came to mind for me in being able to spell out the difference between value generation as a senior leader versus value generation as a functional leader.
Yeah, that is, first of all, I will love you forever for the wonderful work you and our team did on that. And it's such a great example of there's layers of leadership in this example, right? So, and each each person's contribution in this process was highly valuable to the organization. But what Maggie described was two leaders being really conscious about what their roles were and who was going to deliver which pieces in that. So maybe, Maggie, we talk a little bit about some of the more specific areas we would expect leaders to be thinking about when it comes to value creation as they move up through their careers. And one of the things that you described, just to kick this off, was that it was your job to manage the team to delivery on your vision once you had done the analysis and created the vision. So certainly managing the team to goal is where we want leaders to be spending their time and scaling into. What else comes up for you, Maggie?
Well, I think this is another piece, stakeholder management and relationship development. And that's that piece that I talked about where being new into the organization, I had a fresh set of eyes to look at how decisions were being made and how those decisions played out in the relationships within Bright Arrow. And then to be able to kind of call those out and say, oh, hey, can we do this differently? Can we talk about these things differently? And so you being the stakeholder of that project, and then we had the team of people who were delivering that project. Mm-hmm. So when we say stakeholder management and relationship development, that was a key piece of that project that is not written down on paper. There was no checkbox at the end of the day, but it was definitely a part of the work.
Great. So another place I think leaders should be spending their time, and that only a leader can do, is in the pattern and theme spotting. So really being able to look across their purview, whatever it is that we're managing, and identifying where we're starting to see patterns or themes emerge and making meaning from those things. Sometimes patterns and themes are wonderful and we should see them and capitalize on them and do more work that aligns us to that. Sometimes themes and patterns we see are the things detracting our team from delivering work or slowing us down. Only a leader sits in a position to analyze that, have their hand on the pulse or their fingers on the pulse, and decide what it is the team or the organization is going to do about that.
And once you identify those themes and patterns, then you can get clear on removing obstacles. Mm-hmm. What are those, harmful patterns that we need to address so that we can remove obstacles to the next thing?
Yeah. I will put one little tune up on that point, which is leaders. When your team members point out obstacles to you, it is still your job to discern if it is your obstacle to remove as a team leader or the obstacle you coach them through the removing of. And a lot of times over the years, what I had presented to me as a team leader as an obstacle were relationship issues that one of my directs was probably having with someone else. They weren't able to give the level of influence they needed to get their thing done. And so there was a lot of coaching them through. I hear you on that. I'd like for you to go back and have the conversation with this partner about X or Y. Do you want some coaching on how to approach it? Let me know how it goes. So it's really tempting because it is our main job as leaders to try to remove obstacles for the people that report to us. But we have got to be careful that we aren't picking up things that they could do. Because the point for you to think about is, what is it that only you can do, not that your team members can do? So wanted to emphasize that for you, Maggie, on that point.
Well, and that speaks to kind of our final bullet in this section, which is about leadership influence. Mm-hmm. Your job as a leader is to influence and direct versus do. And so getting clear about, okay, you're having a relationship issue and my job is to influence the way that you might think about that and support you in that, but not to get in a room and solve it for you, not to go to that person. Because especially when we talk about conflict in organizations, once you've gone to another person and started talking about something that you heard from somebody else, things go south really quickly. So really even letting people sit within their own challenges. So when we say remove obstacles, but then we say, well, I'll coach you to remove your own obstacles. What's an example where you might, as a leader, remove an obstacle that isn't then giving it back to the other person or coaching that other person?
Mm-hmm. Well, we could even use the same example, but it'll be a bit nuanced. So let's say an employee has come to me and said, I cannot get this decision made in partnership with this other team. And we can't take the next step in our process for our team until this other team does a thing we need it to do. There are times when it's appropriate to send that person back to their peer stakeholder on the cross-functional team and encourage the two of them to work through it. There are times, though, when those two peers don't have the correct level of authority and influence, and it really does come back to me to then go work with my peer leader on that team. And the two of us need to have a meeting of the minds about how we move our teams forward together. And I would be probably the best qualified to decide, who really owns the decision and the relationship in moving that work forward. Does that help clarify some, Maggie? Do you think for our listeners? Okay.
Yes. I think positioning it as where only you have authority, because I think when we've been in functional leadership roles, all of us have experienced the frustration that comes with not having the authority to move something along, but our leader not maneuvering into that position to block and tackle for us, and to use more aggressive language.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have gone through all of these things that only a leader can do. And the whole point of this webinar is, how do you scale yourself? Because I think that a lot of leaders feel this. And if you signed up for this webinar, you may be feeling this acutely. I know I need to do these things, but now how do I actually have time to do the things that I know that I need to do to generate that value? So, what specifically, getting really tactical, would we say people should do when they make time to think about their work?
Well, Maggie, I would like to first emphasize, as someone who coaches C-suite leaders, that we are working with CEOs on this topic. We are working with all levels of C-suite, VPs and above. It doesn't really matter, your level in an organization. We kind of seem to need regular reminders that it's our job to think. But here's one distinction I want to make for those of you who've tuned in. When we start out in our career, we are rewarded early for autonomous work, production, creating tangible work product and deliverables. The higher up we go in our career, the more it is our job to think and to use our brains to identify the patterns and be looking out for the business and to be looking out for our team and to be in relationship and to sit across all of those tactical things that other leaders are doing that you used to do early in your career. What we watch with our clients over the years is that they struggle to identify the moment when that changed in their career. You are the best one to identify that moment. And ideally, you have leaders reporting to you who can now pick up the pieces of delivering that tangible work product, at least more often than not. I recognize some leaders still have some responsibility for delivering their tangible work product. But it is our job, the further along we are as leaders, to be spending time thinking. And if you've never had an executive coach, here's what it really is like. An executive coach is a thought partner. So we spend time thinking alongside our clients and ideating with them and bouncing ideas around and brainstorming and solving problems. And we talk often about what it is they need to be thinking about outside of our sessions, and then how to think about it. So we're going to give away over the next few minutes, like kind of the behind the scenes view of what is it we're often, advising our clients to do in these cases.
But real quick, before we get into that, I just want to say that when we get into the things that only a leader can do and exactly how we spend our time, for me personally, you talked about moving up from a functional role. And I've been in an executive role for almost 10 years now. And to this day, when I sit down to do the things that we're about to tell everybody to do, I have a sense of, it's not guilt, but just this sense that I'm meandering, that I'm not actually getting anything done. And so I have to remind myself routinely that the output is not the same anymore, that the highest quality that I can bring to you or Bright Arrow is the theme spotting, is cross-functional efficiencies. And if I don't give myself time to think about that, then no one's paying attention to it. So
That's right.
I just want to acknowledge for all of us, when we've been conditioned as functional leaders to have a very specific work product that looks like a thing that we can email or check off a list or count, that then when we've spent time thinking, it doesn't always feel effective. So just to acknowledge that before we dive in. Okay.
I love that. And I want to just answer back to that, Maggie, that even our C-suite clients that we coach feel, it's a dopamine hit we get by doing things and feeling like there's action and activity. And so we're biologically wired to do and to act. And it takes some real discipline, even for our C-suite clients, to think and set aside time and be consistent and disciplined about it. And I always say to them, if you're not thinking about your business, then who is? And that's usually the moment where the light bulbs go off on the value of that, because that's so crisp and clear that it's scary to imagine that someone's not sitting down to think about a function or the business in its entirety, at least not often enough, right? Mm-hmm. So Maggie and I will kind of probably drift in and out of really tactical things and then also philosophical, casings around these tactical things. So I think the first thing I always recommend for my clients who I coach in the C-suite is that they set aside at least 2 hours a week to think as a starting point, which probably blew everybody's hair back who's listening. I'll
say, when I end up in my thinking periods where I feel like I'm not getting anything done, it's because I've actually bumped into a problem that I don't know how to solve. And so then I grant myself this permission to go spend time thinking about it. But in reality, if I had that time blocked on my calendar every week, it would be better.
And I set aside my thinking time for a place where I know it won't be interrupted. And depending on the cycle of my life and what's going on for me personally, I have a young child. Sometimes that's really early in the morning because personally for me, I do my best thinking then. So before anyone's up in the house, I may have an hour and a half or two where I'm just thinking in the morning and really mapping out what we need to be doing at Bright Arrow. Earlier in my career, when I was working inside of organizations, I would find that Friday afternoons were the best time for this. So I would block out a couple of hours in the afternoon. And, Maggie used the word like we could find ourselves meandering. What a great word, because our brains are, there's a map in our heads. Things don't move linearly ever. And thinking is not a linear exercise. And so I think coming to your thinking time with some kind of framework or plan is important. And you may open your thinking time by spending the first 10 minutes defining what it is you need to be thinking about. So I want to emphasize, if you sit down and you're like, I'm just going to think about my business for a couple of hours, best of luck creating value from that. Our brain needs some boundaries. So Maggie, what else comes up for you in terms of what should we be thinking about in those times?
Right. So thinking about meetings you've been in, and then what are you hearing in those meetings? What are you hearing in emails that are coming through? What are you seeing stakeholders feeling about things that they're interacting with? And how well we're managing to goal? And using data on all of those things as frequently as possible, because we all have our own bias as well, right? So again, to your point about we can meander in our thought, and that's really healthy, but let's also put a few little boundaries in place. I think being really clear about data is important as well. So making sure that our own bias as leaders doesn't get in the way of what the data actually says about what needs to be done next. So what's in your meetings? What are you hearing? What are your stakeholders feeling about what's going on? And how are you managing to goal?
Love that. What comes up for me next is thinking about our humans. I don't want to say
my favorite.
Yeah, I know that is your favorite. And that's not a joke. Maggie's such a human-centered leader, as we all are here, but that is Maggie's particular passion. And I think it's important that when we take time to think, we literally kind of break out our org chart and put our eyeballs on it and just check in kind of psychically or energetically with, how is Stacy doing? What came up for her in our last one-on-one? What do I need to be thinking about for her? How can I help fuel her work? What obstacles do I need to remove? That's one way to slice what might be going on in your work ecosystem, but also thinking about personally what's going on. I think as we've come into, really stressful chapter over the last several years between, social unrest, political unrest, COVID, and then continued kind of social and economic disturbances, it's important to check in on the humans. Like, are they caring for aging parents? Do they have multiple young children or a young child at home? Do they have a pet that's not doing well? Really thinking about what's going on in the human life of our friends and people at work and colleagues and employees is just as important as thinking about the business problems. And I think we deal with that as a reactionary response rather than looking for themes. As a senior leader, if you have dozens of directs, or I hope you don't, I hope that's pressed down to a few directs. But if you have a lot of folks on your team that report to you, you may notice a pattern of like, wow, I have 4 employees who are caring for aging or ailing parents. You might need to think about that, not just like as to do we have the support they need, but also is there risk for your team and having that many folks who may need to take time out all at once? So there's multiple reasons we want to check in on the lives of our people and make sure they're cared for.
Yeah, I was talking with a colleague just recently who said that she's worked with a direct report for 2 years. They finally had been together after 2 years. They had never been in the same place. And she said, in COVID, we went remote. We've stayed that way. But I don't think anybody ever took the time to intentionally think about what it looks like to lead in this way. And so she said, I had this direct report who was telling me all these pain points that she has about her work with our company. And I felt that I had them all too. And there's just never been anybody to think about how do we intentionally show up with and for our people. And I think this is really critical. And I'll just say, from a personal standpoint, I have worked for leaders who have checked in with me. And there's a moment where it just feels so nice to know that somebody's actually thinking about me and what might be going on in my life.
Yeah.
And also trust my resilience in that. Right. So this isn't like a pity thing. It's I'm really glad to know that's going on. And what do you need, if anything? And I trust your resilience. It can be as simple as that. Yes. But when we don't have the water cooler, or we can't walk by somebody's cubicle and notice that they don't look okay today, it's really important that we're even more intentional in this remote world that we live in.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you, Maggie. I would add something else that we want you to be thinking about in your time to think is what's going on in the broader business ecosystem that can be cyclical, and making sure you're planning ahead and forecasting additional time you may need to spend on things like talent reviews, annual planning and budgeting. What's going on in the marketplace? Are you reading industry news? What's going on in that broader ecosystem in your industry? Upcoming conferences, upcoming client tours, right? So like really just thinking about not just your team, but the broader ecosystem and some of the cyclical milestones or events that tend to crop up. All of those things take time, and they're not always baked into our annual goals for the team or the organization. So really kind of having, some foresight about those saves you time by being able to plan ahead, believe it or not.
Yeah. And I think even just having those things, I'm a super visual person. So having those things mapped out somewhere so that I can see that they're coming, in October or November. And then I know that this is going to bump up against me really quickly if I don't start thinking about it right now.
Right.
So,
right.
And then I think that is also key when we have people in multiple geographies, because there are different things happening in different teams, or sometimes people have different products that they're overseeing.
Yeah.
And so getting really clear about how you view your work, not just by a calendar view, but also by a functional or a geographical view makes sense too.
Yeah. When you say that, what comes up for me is, what we're positing is that we need to structure our thinking time. And when we have so very much information we could swim in, in that thinking time. I think our ability to slice all of our data or all of our planning in particular ways is important. So geographies is a great example. So when I was managing teams across the globe, they each had different initiatives. Sometimes they had different technologies. They certainly had different vendors that were supporting each region. So I would slice my work, my thinking time by Asia Pac, Europe, United States, and then United States sometimes by time zone, depending on how robust the work was in each region. So I think that geography is certainly a way you could slice your thinking time. So really that means you're thinking about the same things, but times however many geographies. So if you're thinking about budgeting, you're thinking about your budget for Europe, for Asia, for the US. If you're thinking about people, you're looking at your org chart for Asia, for US, right? For Europe. So I would just think about how you want to slice that up. You may slice that by project. So if your organization tends to organize itself to project or product deliverables, you may slice your thinking time by project or product, depending on, again, your work cycles. And then a really simple way that I've used over the years that you may consider is the 3 Ps: people, product, process. Might be a nice way to organize your thinking time, and maybe also problems. So the 4th P that we don't always love to look at, but that could be a nice bucket to capture, like, these are urgent items that only I can think about that need to be solved now. So you might try out those 3 Ps. We'll say a 4th with the problems. I think that is important as you structure it.
So real quick, we have a little bit more to cover on this topic, but a question came in and I want to just ask it now. Somebody asked, what does thinking time look like? Is there a process, or do you just sit down quietly and take notes? Or would you call people, or would you sketch out ideas? So what for you, Tegan, what does that look like?
God, can I just say I love this question? Thank you so much. Audra, thank you so much. I think, well, here's my recommendation. I think as a practice, it should look really similar week over week, because your brain will get accustomed to giving you what you need if you give it a consistent framework. However, there are times when you may need a thought partner. I mean, I certainly call Maggie on the regular to have some thought partnership, but that is usually an action from my thinking time. So I prefer my thinking time to be purely me going inside of myself, looking at our data, and really getting in the weeds on what only I can think about before I take either my proposition or my idea to someone else to partner with. I do it in quiet. Sometimes I will use a little music in the background, and then I still like to use a pen. It may not be an ink pen. I've moved on to an iPad note-taking device with an electronic pen. And then sometimes I'll also create templates or, things like frameworks that we're using internally at Bright Arrow that will then update weekly depending on what's come from our thinking time. But what comes up for me is there are a few tools that I recommend, especially when you're starting out your practice of really, really thinking. And this is true for the C-suite. This is what I recommend for our clients, to be very thorough thinkers. I would have your stakeholder map. So ideally, as a leader, you have a stakeholder map that you update quarterly or every 6 months. That's who is it our work touches? What is it we need to deliver for them? What does their relationship require? How do they like to be communicated with? How frequently will I update them? And what do I need back from them? That's a high level, what a stakeholder map should be. So really thinking about your stakeholders. I would have your goals printed out. What is it my team signed up to deliver? What is it I'm held accountable to deliver personally, if that's separate from your team's goals? I would have your meeting agenda up for the next week so that whatever comes out of your thinking time, you can pop it right onto the meeting agenda if it needs multiple agendas, probably, depending on stakeholders you manage. Key reports. So Maggie talked about the value of data. So have those weekly, monthly reports, budgets, whatever, ready and in front of you. Org charts, and then key events, calendars, whatever kind of helps you know what's on the horizon. So those are some really tactical pieces I would have out in front of me for my thinking time.
For me as COO, this work for me often gets structured by functional area and strategic goal within that functional area. So it's a kind of a not step by step, but like each group each functional area, I tap into, pay attention to what's happening there, what's happening with the people there, where are we at with that goal, where have we hit barriers. So it's functional and by goal is mainly how I'm making my way through that. One of the other things that you mentioned, Tegan, to me before was whatever comes from those meetings, making sure that, or those meetings, whatever comes from that time for yourself, making sure that you then take things that need to be done that only you can do and delegate time on your own calendar to see those things through.
Yes.
So it's kind of this, here's your time that you've spent. You've sliced and diced your time at paying attention to the things in the way that you need to. And then immediately following that, putting time on your calendar to achieve very specific things. It may be checking in with a person. It may be checking in with a stakeholder. It may be removing that obstacle from the employee that came to you. So whatever those things are, making sure that they then have the time in your role to get them done.
Oh, thank you for bringing that through. Yes.
And then I'm going to bring up another question that came up because this is a people-y one. So I'm going to jump in on it. But the question is from Cassie, and she says they have a charity organization. So they obviously care really deeply about their people. They're people-centered. And they're struggling to strike the right balance between showing up for people and trusting their resilience when it's a lot. And there are a lot of people with maybe a lot of issues, personal issues, and their resilience may not be there. And this is something that is always a challenge for businesses because it's the balance of a business to care for its people and function as a business. And if you're not feeling that struggle in the balance of that as a leader, then I would guess you're probably not stepping into that challenge enough. That you're probably over-functioning on one or the other, overly centered on your people or overly centered on the business and ignoring the other. So one, I think that it's good that you're in the position where you're like, how do I strike that balance? And the other thing is, if you're right now in a place where the people support is derailing or causing challenges to meet the business goals that have to be met also, to find outside supports. As businesses, we can put benefits in play for people that allow them to go get more support that remove us from being that support. And that is also a form of trusting someone's resilience and showing up for them. So do you have an EAP? Do you have a coach? Can you get that person a coach? So thinking through some of those outside supports that you can put in that person's hands, maybe even help them navigate to get to the next step within that benefit. But that would be my guidance if you're feeling overly drawn into personal issues, which also can sometimes become a legal challenge as well. So just to value how delicate that line is, I see you and I hear you on that. And my recommendation would be outside benefits.
Yeah. And remember, we can get interim programming for our employees. We don't have to sign up for a thing for the next 3 years. This can be just-in-time support that you're seeing a theme across your organization that they need specialized programming for a while. So it's really great. Yeah. Great. And you were the right person to answer that question, Maggie, with your wellness background. So
I've had that one before.
Yeah.
So getting back to making time to think about our work, there are some common pitfalls we talked about, which is making sure that we let go of the need to get in the weeds and solve functionally, that we value this time for ourselves, that we block it on our calendar, and that we prioritize what comes out of that meeting time with ourselves.
There's two more things I will quickly add because I'm watching our time dwindle. One is, what aren't you thinking about, or what should you not think about? So we, again, as a leader, you could solve all the problems, but good luck. That's not scaling yourself. You don't have the time to solve everyone's problems and the new ones you should be focused on. So I have to be careful, as does every leader I know, that I'm not spending my precious thinking time thinking about something that my team's qualified to think about and solve. So be conscious of that in your thinking time. And then also scan for the cross-functional contributions you're making and the cross-functional work you're doing. Those are key relationships. They should be on your stakeholder map. So really making sure that you aren't only serving your closest purview, but that you're really thinking about how you create value across the organization, across the aisles, if you will, at work. And I think our thinking time is the best time to check in on that.
Well said. So getting to the point of making sure you're not getting into the weeds on something that shouldn't be yours. You can identify it, but then don't get stuck there, brings us to being able to delegate effectively. And I have to be honest, every time I hear delegate as a solution to my time sheet, my time balance, I have an internal eye roll like, I've been in an executive role for 10 years. I feel pretty good about my ability to delegate, and I've done a decent job of that. But I also think, trying to put this into an example from my own leadership world is recently we needed some work to go to a designer. And I said to Tegan, I am going to type all of the copy out for this thing that needs to be done. And once I get the copy done, then I will send it to the designer. And Tegan pushed back and said, I bet he has enough copy from us over the course of his work with us that he can pull this together with the examples we give him. And I was like, So I was going to delegate all the way down to just literally handing off the task versus handing off the strategic deliverable. So I did that. I handed off the example. I said, this is what we need to create. Can you pull from the other things you've created for us, the copy from there to build this? Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we had one or two drafts after that with minor changes because he did such an excellent job. So I was going to move it all the way down to task delegation before I handed it off. So when we say delegate effectively, what we're going to talk about is keeping it in strategic delegation. So your job is to vision the strategy, to set the strategy, but then to also delegate the deliverable of the strategy.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And as you talk about delegating, one of the things I have liked to do over the years and that I encourage my clients to do now is to check in with the team to just see, you could use this as a reset question. In fact, if you're on this webinar, you're trying to scale yourself, this is probably a great thing to go back and do right afterwards. In your next check-in with one-on-ones with each of your team members, simply ask, if you scan the work lately that you've been doing, where are areas you need less of my involvement? And the reason I suggest that is because, one, it's just a polite question. It signals that you trust your people and that you believe in them. Two, sometimes we overvalue our contributions. I mean, just, we are more important than we think we are sometimes, And so I think just checking in with our people to say, hey, do you need less of me in some places? Where do you want to just go and run and go do your best work and try some things out on your own? Now, as a leader, if you have folks on your team that you don't feel super confident they have all the skill, you can give them the permission to try things, but put the guardrails in that you need. Go create a first draft. Let's look at it next Wednesday. And then you can give some coaching or some feedback and suggestion on how they go about it. That time investment allows them to go do it the next time on their own because they will, number one, have the skill, and two, they'll know what your feedback is in their head. They can hear you in their minds after you've done this a couple times with them. So I think really delegating is beyond it's also about stretching the people who report to us and giving them a shot at the thing, which you will find most of them want, but they don't want to hurt your feelings and tell you to back off. So invite them to tell you to back off, just in case that's what they want. And that is helping you build a bench strength on your team, which is always part of our goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us on this call can appreciate or understand how much we would appreciate if previous leaders would have come to us and said, where do you need less of me? And you could even say, where do you need more of me? But even just the opportunity to tell a leader, hey, I've got this one. Let me have a chance at it. And what a great thing to hear as a leader, to know where somebody's feeling confident and capable to get something done.
Yeah.
So that we're not over functioning in that area.
Yeah.
And to Tegan's point, if you're not there on their ability to do the thing that they feel really confident about, you can always give them a shot and have a first draft and have a feedback iterative process.
Yeah.
You mentioned building bench strength.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we build bench strength? Clearly identify it with talent goals while delegating.
Oh, well, just a light question from Maggie Gough, as always. So I think the way we build bench strength through delegation is really, look, it's your job to work yourself out of a job. I didn't know where I was going to have the opportunity to say this today. I was thinking about this morning as we're preparing for the webinar, the importance of being ready for your next leadership role. And you are not going to be free of obligation and psychic energy where you're spending your thinking time to step into your promotion unless you have grown the team under you to either run in collection without you for a while you step into your role and your backfill is identified, or to just be able to take the move right away. And I have personally witnessed over many years how often someone's ready for that next role and the CEO has to say, we can't move you there yet. We can't have your foot off the gas on your team, and your team's not ready to lead without you, or you haven't identified your number two. And it takes a lot of time to make that happen. You either have to hire for that, which a lot of leaders, we inherit our teams. We don't get to just reset the deck. Or if you can't hire for it, then you have to build it. And that's your time investment. And it's a great use of your time. So when you hand someone on your team and you delegate them a task, here is a sentence I would give you to use. I am giving you this task or this deliverable because you're so brilliant at X or you're showing promise in X. And what do you need from me in order to deliver this work or get it started? And again, if it's someone who's new to this or you don't have the highest faith in because they haven't had a chance to prove themselves, set up those guardrails of like, do you want to check in before you present the final draft or deliverable to me? Or you could say, I would like a check-in before you present me the final draft or deliverable. So notice how you are saying you're paying a high compliment to your employee by giving them this thing. And motivate, inspiring them to take that step. And you're offering support while you do it, which takes care of you because you need the thing done well, but it gives them the support they need to show up as their best. And doing that multiple times a month with multiple employees builds the bench strength. You're no longer the only one that can run and analyze the report. You're no longer the only one that can produce the thing. And here's the objection I always hear from leaders when I suggest this, Maggie. My team's already exhausted. Very common. I get it. I've been there. What my response to that is that when you have motivated employees who are dying for growth, and most of them are so eager to grow, giving them this thing, which is, yes, it's more work, it gives them energy because it's the work they want. It's the stretch they want. So it actually gives them more energy to continue to be resilient through what is a high volume of work outside of that one deliverable.
Yeah, that's so interesting because people do want the opportunity to grow. It roots them into their purpose, which when there's a lot going on that's overwhelming, it shifts their presence within their work. Yeah, feel less daunting. We did have a question that came in. It relates back to this a bit. It's from Michelle. She said, how would you suggest coaching leaders who have fallen into a mindset of apathy regarding taking an interest in their direct reports?
What a wonderful thing to think about. Michelle, we're just brutally honest here, right? What comes up for me is if there's multiple leaders that fit that description, something is afoot in the organization. And it could be that they are not quite at the skill level they need to be to lead. It could be that they are just really drained and exhausted themselves as a leadership team. So for me, it comes as either kind of skill or something in the context of the culture of the organization that's not giving enough lift for that. The third place you could look is, are we are we compensating those leaders for the leadership of their direct reports? Like, is there a way you're incentivizing them to take an interest, often by means of having very clear outputs that tie to their compensation, which doesn't always, isn't always our comp model inside of organizations. So I think I would do a check-in on skill, or will. We always say that in coaching. When there's resistance, it's either skill or will. So which one is it? But I think will is compounded or affected by what's going on in the context of the organization, especially if it's more than one leader. Maggie, anything you would add there?
No, I do think it's just a really challenging place to be. And I agree with you that it speaks to something more going on if it is occurring with more than one leader. Mm-hmm. To something to mill on.
Yeah.
So I want to be cautious about time because we're coming. We've talked about so many juicy things. So, and thank you all for your questions. They've been so excellent. But the next thing we wanted to cover was making sure that we look at how do we optimize our workflows. And just to let you know how nerdy I am as a COO, this is my favorite section. I do love people, but I also love a good workflow because there's nothing that aggravates people more than inefficient work or work that never crossed a finish line that we all gave our best to because we just didn't think it all the way through. So when we talk again, we use words like generate value, optimizing workflows. So break it down for us, Tegan. What do we mean when we say optimizing workflows?
It all starts with thinking about how your work gets done from idea, it's a concept, all the way to the end. And I would include the parts in the front of like, how do we set the goal? How will we know that this work product is done? Or how do we know our work is complete and we measure success along the way? So I always suggest for leaders to, depending on the size and sophistication of your organization, you might just have to take pen to paper and sketch out your workflows. Over the years, when I was in-house and I had large operational components supporting our work delivery, we did a lot of process maps, which is super tactical, but you need the tactical stuff to get to the strategic sometimes, and especially when it comes to optimizing workflows. So Visio is a great tool. Just anyone can learn it. I promise you, it's super simple. You may have analysts in your organization who can help you set these up, or operations experts. You could hire someone as a project if you have the budget to help you set up your workflows and document them as they are. Don't change them while you're documenting them. And then look for waste. So when my team is delivering work and the work product goes out here to a functional team, how long does it take for them to get it back to my team? Like, how does the work come in and out of your team? And how many steps are there in the process of delivering your work product? And then, Maggie, what questions would you ask there, my COO friend? Once you have that outline, this is your genius. So where does your head go?
So for me, there's always, because I'm looking cross-functionally at the organization, for me, there's always, okay, there's this other strategic goal we're trying to meet over here, and we could probably get that done, and it would make more sense to get that done in the midst of this process over here. So from a timeline perspective, an efficiencies perspective, I want to also identify all of the ways that in achieving one goal, we've moved 2 or 3 others along. And so just to give yourself the time to think about all of the different processes all the different workflows you've got going on, and where one workflow enhances another. But here's the most painful part for me. When I have identified that there's a thing that I could move further along, but to your point about when it goes out to that cross-functional team, how long is it going to take? Is it a detriment to the end goal that this thing needs to achieve, this workflow needs to achieve? Because if it is, there's sometimes that we identify it and painfully have to let it sit there and know that it's not going to be the most exact, efficient process, but that we have to strike the right balance between getting something achieved and done and having it sit in perfection mode forever.
Beautiful. It's really being able to prioritize what really gets the attention to change in the workflow and what could become a project later, right?
Yeah. And kudos to the functional leaders who get told, yeah, we're not going to get that one done, even though it could get done here, because that stinks. But anyway, it is important.
And when we work with senior teams and C-suite executive teams, we look at those workflows at the right level of the organization to help them think about where things get stuck or what's slowing them down from having real agility in their organization at the executive level. And I will tell you what we find every time, that it is where interdependencies happen. So that means this team and this team have to work together in order to get the thing done. And what we try to do is like, I'll do my part and then you do your part. That's not true interdependence. Interdependence is working together as kind of a team of teams or a cross section of, people from each team to help move the work forward. That's how it happens quickly. But I will tell you, in 99% of the organizations we work with, that's where we find their inefficiencies sit. So really think about, as you optimize your workflow, it's not just about that one line for your team. It's about all the places your work intersects in the organization where you're going to get more bang for your buck. And that is why we emphasize the importance of thinking about your relationships in the organization and thinking about what contributions you've made interdepartmentally, because you're going to need to ask them for favors too.
So just to put a fine point on all of this, ultimately what we want to see for Bright Arrow, from our expertise to you, is that when you get clear on scaling yourself as a leader, ultimately, you are developing the people on your team. So we're coming down to time. So if you want to just give us like one or two sentences about that, Tegan, and because we've already touched on it, but how exactly, what is the direct connection between getting clear on what we need to do in our time and how it develops the people on our team?
Yeah. I will make this as simple as possible. My personal process from my thinking time is that there is a list that comes out of it. It's an action list or a to-do list. I own a lot of those things, ideally. And I spend time putting notes in each to-do item of like, nope, this is going to go to Maggie. Love you, Maggie. Or this is going to go to Simona, or this goes to our coach cohort team. And here's why. And so when I'm done, I'm clear on this helps them grow, or this maximizes this, or this is just not something I should be thinking about. So I think when you take that to-do list, don't just take it on, really then scrutinize the to-do list as your last action item to think about which of these to-dos go to someone else because it helps them learn and grow.
Yes, which ultimately is what Bright Arrow is about, which is leadership development. So to that end, we want to tell you a little bit about what we actually do. If you do want more support, we provide executive coaching and leadership team coaching. So Tegan talked about understanding your team of teams. That often is work that comes out of leadership team coaching. We provide diagnostic assessments to individuals. So psychometric assessments like DISC or Hogan. We provide coaching around that. And then we can also come in and do half-day workshops and provide some C-suite thought partnerships. If there's something quick that you want to do, like help me master my to-do list, my thinking time, let's do this in a short burst, that would be a C-suite thought partnership. Anything else to add?
Yeah, or like name any business problem. We'll come sit with the C-suite and the CEO and help think through it. So this is what all of, our delivery of these things is what all of our insight and knowledge we're sourced in today, along with our own experience as in our leadership in the past and today. As we close, I want to acknowledge, Christian, I see your last little note in the Q&A. The concept of optimizing workflows resonates with me. I love lean management, but I struggle to see its application in my global leadership team. Yeah, that's not uncommon. So if I may suggest, if you are the leader of that global leadership team, you have full autonomy to suggest they're all going to be trained in your lean management thinking, and you're going to adopt a framework together. That's one. Two, if you're a peer on this team, maybe crowdsourcing that some of your peers may also appreciate having a new way to think about lean thinking or how you tackle your problems together. You can be a leader among leaders as a peer and sort of gain a little internal temperature to see if other people would sign up, and then take that to your CEO and say, I have a suggestion. How do you feel about this? And here's the evidence that could help us. So just to end today with a little bit more advice through our Q&A chat, Christian, so great to see you. And thank you for your question. So feel free to reach out to Maggie or I if you want to continue the conversation or if we can be helpful in your organization. Otherwise, we're concluding our webinar today. Maggie, thank you for your partnership as always inside of Bright Arrow and today on our webinar. We will hope to see you all again sometime soon.